Jim is connecting. Leslie is now here. Welcome.
You're muted, Leslie.
Hello.
Hi.
Leslie, welcome. Do me a favor, say your last name for me.
Krzan.
Krzan, okay. If I tried without asking, who knows what would happen. All right, I think we've got everybody here, and it's 6:30. We'll call it, even though it's not. But I'd like to call to order the October regular meeting of the Redondo Beach Harbor Commission, and I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor Manzano for the oath of office.
Great. Okay, so if I could have Chairman Kilroy and Commissioner Krzan raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Matthew Kilroy,
I, Leslie Krzan.
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
We work fast.
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well
and faithfully discharge
and faithfully discharge
the duties upon
the duties upon
which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm going to be mailing out the certificate, the blue border you'll keep, you'll sign and you'll keep that, and then the copy you'll sign, and then we'll have a self-addressed envelope for you to mail it back to us.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'll have the chair take over.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I guess our first thing is roll call.
I'm going to unmute myself. There we go. I'm going to take it in the order that I see you on my screen. So, Commissioner Callahan.
Present.
Commissioner Carlson.
Present.
Commissioner Walters.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Unmute yourself, Tom.
Sorry, here. Whoops, here.
Commissioner Krzan.
Present.
And Commissioner Light.
Present.
And Chair Kilroy.
Present. All right. And next, if Commissioner Carlson will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure. Okay, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United
States of America and to the republic
for which
it
stands,
And
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Boy, that is much harder to lead over Zoom.
It certainly is. Thank you very much.
There is a weird echo.
Yeah, between the delays and, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. All right, we need a motion to approve the order of agenda.
So moved.
Yeah,
second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Oh, we need a roll call.
Oh, we got to do a roll call.
You're muted.
And we'll try this again. Roll call vote on the order of agenda. Commissioner Callahan.
Aye.
Commissioner Carlson. That's an aye. Commissioner Walters,
Aye.
Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Krazan,
Aye.
Commissioner Light,
Aye.
and Chair Kilroy.
Aye. And obviously, hearing none opposed. Blue folder items. I do believe we have a blue folder item.
Yes, Commissioners, tonight, for very rarely do we have blue folder items. Tonight you do have a blue folder item, and it's really related to my director's report is what the blue folder item is. As you know, we don't have dredging on the agenda for tonight, but I became aware, I should have known this, but I didn't. I became aware of this public notice for the dredging project, and so I wanted to make sure that was in your packets. I'll fill you in a little bit more on that when we get the director's report. What we need is a motion to accept the blue folder item.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And I guess we got another roll call vote.
We do. Commissioner Callahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Carlson.
Aye.
Commissioner Walters,
Aye.
Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Krazan,
Aye.
Commissioner Light,
Aye.
Chair Kilroy.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent calendar, which everything will be approved in one motion unless somebody wants to pull something. Do we have any comments from the public with regards to the consent calendar?
We do not have any e-comments.
And there are no Zoom.
Currently, there are no attendees of our meeting online, so no
Correct.
comment that I'm aware of.
Very good. So I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Seconded.
And another roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Callahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Carlson.
Aye.
Commissioner Walters,
Aye.
Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Krazan,
Aye.
Commissioner Light,
Aye.
Chair Kilroy.
Aye. All right, very good. We do not have excluded consent calendar items. Public participation on non-agenda items. So we don't have anybody attending by Zoom. Do we have any e-comments on non-agenda items?
I'm going to refresh my screen just to make sure we do not have any comments.
All right, we don't have any items continued from previous agendas. Items for discussion, we have on to our quarterly public safety report.
So tonight we're lucky to have with us Lieutenant Jeff Mendence from the police department, who's going to give you the public safety report for the police department, and Chief Metzger is also here for the fire department. Why don't we start with Chief Metzger, please, if you'd like to go first, and then Lieutenant Mendence will get you right after the chief.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So the Harbor Patrol's third quarter report really focuses on the months of July, August, and September. You received all of the data associated with all the incidents in a large spreadsheet. What I wanted to do this time around was just break out the third quarter 2020 and compare it against the third quarter 2019. There's some pretty significant changes that were identified, certainly by Harbor Patrol. And between those two quarters, the increases in Mayday calls during those 3 months were increased in 2020 by 50%. We don't necessarily have an explanation for that other than the fact that certainly we believe that there's more people out there boating, but don't really know why there was an increase of 50% over 2019. In addition, and two other significant increases, SUP PFDs, citing SUPers for failing to have PFDs, actually increased 78% over 2019. And this is actually against the trend that we have been seeing where more peers seemed to be compliant. They were getting the rules of the road. They were understanding things. And then we saw this interesting reversal. It's not a lot of instances, so I'm really not sure how overall how statistically significant it is, because I don't have any anything to compare it against related to how many SUP folks were out on the water, but the instances of noncompliance were up 78%. Just as important under SUP and swimming, and this isn't just SUP, it's instances of swimming. We, over 2019, we saw an increase this year of 120%. Now, when talking with the Harbor Patrol folks, they clearly are attaching the significance of COVID to the swimming thing. There's people feel like they have to get out and have to do something and recreate, and swimming seems like an interesting thing to do. So those things are on our radar for trying to reduce those numbers if we can. The last thing I want to point out to you on Harbor Patrol stats for 2020, during the months of August and September, if you scan all the way down to the bottom under the section of miscellaneous, and you look at public information contact and public assist, you will see for the months of August and September that those spaces are now blank. The reason for that is that the individual who previously had been performing those duties, Steve McGrath, took a different assignment here in the fire department. He's actually working in our Fire Prevention Bureau, but he previously had been the civilian contact at Station 3 and handled a lot of the requests for public information and calls for public assist, and he's not there to do that. And frequently, our Harbor Patrol people aren't there either. This is a consequence of budget cuts. So it certainly has impacted the numbers. The overall impact of the numbers comparing 2020 against 2019, even though we had a stark increase in actual instances that Harbor Patrol would respond to, our numbers overall were down because of not having somebody to fill those public information contact requirements. So we looked at a total for the quarter of 739 contacts for 2020 versus 1,059 in 2019. So other than that, the statistics are what they are. Not a lot of significant movement up or down other than what I cited. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them at this time.
Raise hand.
Commissioner Light.
Yeah, one question, Chief Metzger. Is any of that illegal swimming associated with the boat parties and bands that have been out there?
Boat parties and bands? Why, sir, to what are you referring? Yeah, it could be, but they weren't actually cited for that. What we're referring to here mostly are people that seem to already be on or in the water related to their SUPs, or people who entered the water from the breakwall or from some other, perhaps the small boat launch. And those were the ones we were principally focused on. But the boat parties, that's a whole nother separate issue. I didn't come to formally present on that, but if there are any questions associated with that, I'd be happy to answer them.
That was going to be my next line of questioning. Is that, what's the Harbor Patrol position on that? Are they legal, or are we going to do anything about it, or is it just, we're just letting it happen?
So, great question. Number one, they're not legal in that anytime there is an event in the harbor, there needs to be, it needs to be approved. And none of these impromptu parties or so-called events have been approved. They've not gone through the normal city vetting process to try to get an understanding of what the person who's going to put it on intends for the public. So it's a violation of city procedure and policy. And it's also, from my perspective, a violation of municipal code because we have people anchoring in the channel, even though they may be outside of the main channel, they are anchoring in the channel without permission. And the real problem with it is that along with the anchoring and the event, you also have swimming and you also have other activities that apparently are being coordinated or sanctioned by the person putting this stuff on, but they don't have any authority to approve any of these things. So they are violations. The Harbor Patrol is doing its best in trying to monitor and control this, but they have limited authority to actually cite and create a response, create an obligation to respond, simply because under the municipal code, the language of the municipal code is absent specific language for Harbor Patrol to issue citation. That is a process that is undergoing review through the city attorney's office. It is our intention, and I believe his, to change the municipal code to grant that authority to Harbor Patrol. But there's a lot going on in the city attorney's office, and that has not yet been produced to be taken to city council for their approval. It's a work in progress. I apologize that we aren't in a position to better enforce it. We have been trying to work with PD to work with us to try to be the ones who would issue the citation. That is also a work in progress too.
And it would seem it's not just an event, but the amplified sound as well as a violation of the municipal code without a permit.
Yes, I'm sure that is. And again, that's the purview of PD. And I don't know, frankly, I don't know what citations may have been issued in any of the three events of which I'm aware, whether or not any citations were issued by PD.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Light. Commissioner Callahan.
Yes. My question is, the police department has service volunteers that take minor reports, take decibel readings, assist with various jobs. Could we slide a trained volunteer in to take over the public information contact?
Hey, I'm all for it because that would assist us in the Harbor Patrol. It's not something, however, that we've explored. I would be happy to take that up with the police chief.
I think it would be a great idea. And then we'd still have the public information contact, and we'd keep our budget intact. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Callahan. Commissioner Carlson.
Thanks. So a question about the activity in the anchorage. And I understand that, like, an amplified concert is probably over the line, but we're trying to encourage that to be an anchorage with boats visiting. And, we've got many, many moorings out there, which cost us, I forget what it is, $100,000 a year. Aren't you going to get some anchoring and some swimming along with that? How do we reconcile that?
So that's a great question. For the kind of event that was going on that we were just alluding to, people aren't using the moorings to fix their vessels fast. They're just dropping anchors, and I don't have any sense of whether or not the anchoring is done correctly. It's been observed by Harbor Patrol. Harbor Patrol said it appeared that the anchoring for the most part was done correctly. So from the standpoint of whether or not it created anything unsafe, they didn't seem to have any real heartache with it. But regardless of whether it's an anchoring or whether it's a mooring, swimming is still not permitted in the harbor. And that's for reasons that it's extremely hard to regulate. And it's really presents a safety challenge for any boaters that might be coming down the channel or even deviating from the channel at all, not looking for swimmers in the water. So we're not trying to encourage swimming. We are trying to create lawful use of the harbor. And to the degree that any kind of an event that is put on down there is vetted by the city, those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to put on where the person who's sponsoring it can demonstrate to us that they've taken into account all of the safety aspects that need to be addressed in order to put this, whatever the thing is that they want to do down there.
So again, I understand the events are something different. What I'm kind of getting at is there's a corner of the harbor, behind the anchorage, behind the Sea Lion haul out dock, where you see more small craft and paddle boats and, the smaller stuff. You see less big power boats, especially moving quickly through there. And, on the one hand, it's fun. When I'm on my stand-up paddleboard, I enjoy going over there. On the other hand, I like that there's a destination over there. People do yoga on there's big yoga groups on stand-up paddleboards over there. It's good for the few remaining businesses that have stuff going on in the harbor. And it also gives all the small craft a destination away from the channel. So, what I'm not proposing we make any changes. It's certainly not on the agenda tonight, but it's just something to think about in the future where maybe the anchorage or maybe that area over in the corner has different rules and we encourage the small craft to go over there and get out of the main channel. I worry, especially in the future after dredging, when we get rid of the sandbar, which seems to collect the stand-up paddle boards. Now, instead of having, a destination in the harbor, the small craft are going to be more in the main channel and swimming everywhere instead of just over in the corner on that sandbar. And, swimming in the harbor is bad. It's challenging, but at least right now, it's over in a corner. It's out of the way. It's not just in the main channel. So, just something to think about in the future as that anchorage gets more populated. I mean, whenever I'm in an anchorage at Catalina, I'm swimming. It's one of the great things about going there. So,
Yeah, I get it. I do. One of the things that I would point out is that when SUPs started their explosive growth in popularity, the city actually put together a plan to try to delineate areas within the harbor that people who wanted to come out and enjoy their paddleboards could do so in essentially a protected and known area. And a big part of it happens to be that area along the west side of the harbor where the shoals are forming. And everything that you just said is true, and it contributes to the enjoyment for paddleboarders. But it's still, it still creates, let's call it an oversight issue to have either Harbor Patrol or the police unit to oversee whether or not what's going on in there related to activities that aren't legal, mostly swimming, is done safely or not. I mean, it's hard to draw the line. I'm glad that I don't have to be the one to actually do that. What we do is we do a lot of our stuff with just verbal advisories, and just if they determine that it's not safe, most people listen. But your point is well taken. And I don't know whether or not the city's going to want to entertain any changes in how they enforce in those areas.
Yeah, I certainly don't put this on you. I'm kind of, throwing it out to the whole commission, just something to think about in the future. Especially when we start talking about, potentially opening up Seaside Lagoon to the ocean again, things like that. So, thanks.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Carlson. Do we have any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Chief. So I think we're on to the police side of the report.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. It's always a tough act to follow to have to go after the chief, but I'll do my best.
I think the police department's up to it.
We do our best. Good evening. I'm Jeff Mendence. I'm part of the team that manages our Pier Harbor unit. Statistics are great both ways, right? Sometimes they help. Sometimes they just blur the lines and confuse things. I'm not going to go line by line and put everyone to sleep, but just piggybacking a little bit on what the chief talked about and some of the concerns recently in the harbor, I just wanted to hit some highlights. I think an important one is the swimmers. From experience, the majority of the swimming contacts we had in the quarter were with kids and younger adults that had swam out from the boat launch or jumped off the sport fishing pier. We got a lot of calls about people jumping off the sport fishing pier. We never saw anyone actually jump off it, but enough people called that there was some credibility there. And we ended up advising 29 different swimmers about swimming that area over the course of the quarter. The PFD issue, I don't have the year-to-year comparison, but we ended up advising or contacting 33 different operators or people that didn't have sufficient or appropriate PFDs on. So that's obviously an ongoing issue and something that we continually work on to educate the public. During the quarter, we ended up assisting 54 people with various needs. That can be them flagging us down. That can be us seeing someone that's in distress. Maybe they fell off their paddleboard or need some type of assistance. And we rendered that help. I hope everyone's following. If you have Instagram, I hope everyone's following our unit on Instagram. It's Redondo Beach PD _MEU. The old adage about a picture being worth 1,000 words really is true. They do some great work. That part of public outreach is tough because you want to show people things that are relevant and draw their interest, but you also have to respect the privacy of the people that you contact and the appropriateness of what you're posting in a public forum. So I think they do a really good job putting information out and providing that illustrative picture of what they're doing in a brief narrative to help show everyone their activities and to be an educational reminder. If you saw, there was a joint operation with Fish and Wildlife that netted some lobster violations that's featured on there. In addition to that, we've trained 10 officers from Manhattan Beach PD and El Segundo PD to operate in the MEU and the Maritime Enforcement Unit. So those 10 officers and the other officers that aren't full-time officers at Redondo really are a great force multiplier when it comes to holiday weekends, so that we can have both an adequate patrol on land and an adequate staff on the boat so that we can safely operate the boat and get out there on the water and conduct operations. So it's been a really big benefit. The other standout or something that people always ask us about, but without context, it's it may not be a great reference, but we did both the land and the water. We arrested 16 people during the quarter for various violations. Some of those were municipal code violations. Some were penal code violations, a number of different violations. So that's the overview. I believe everyone has the full view of the stats. If you have any specific questions, obviously I'm here to answer them, and whatever other questions you have about our MEU operations.
Every time I mute myself, I forget to unmute it. Oh, there's some hands. Commissioner Carlson.
Thanks. Thanks for the report. With the new budget, what's your coverage like on the pier and on the water? Is that worked out okay so far? I know the water's been busy.
Yeah. So obviously the COVID thing has affected all of us. I wouldn't say the silver lining to it, but the one other aspect to it that may be a benefit is that we early on split up our department into different teams so that if we did have people that got sick, they weren't cross-contaminating other people, and there was sufficient police staff, obviously, to continue the operation, an important factor. So we have 4 officers split up on 2 different sets of days and a sergeant, or 3 officers and a sergeant. So we have a total of 4 down there. And because they're working alternating days, during daytime hours, we have full coverage. They also work a payback day once every other week. And we also pay overtime to have people go down there and staff the boat, obviously for holiday weekends and things that come up. So up to this point, fortunately, there hasn't been a significant reduction in the coverage down there. Our biggest issue is just the upkeep of the vessel. We had plenty of appointments through the holiday weekend and into September. We do have a trim issue that's being addressed. There's always going to be something when it comes to vessel maintenance. And as soon as that's been addressed, then the boat will be back in the water. So really, there hasn't been a significant impact on our ability to operate.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Carlson. Commissioner Scherzan.
Hi, thanks for the report. Just a commentary. I'm on the harbor 3 times a week at least, and there's definitely been a lot more SUPs than in past years. And I think our normal outreach, I'm imagining, are, public events like races and such, where we might share boating knowledge. And so we don't really have those ways. So I think probably there's just a lack of education. And I've seen, they don't know a lot of people don't know the buoys and the fact that they're in the middle of an active channel, or where that active part of the channel is. So we might want to just think of other ways for creative outreach to educate them on just simple harbor knowledge, as well as having PFDs.
Absolutely, and it's always great to get different points of view, because there's obviously going to be some things that we don't see, or perspective that we don't see. If you look at our stats, we have 32 citations, that's both land and water, and 16 arrests, and almost 300 contacts total. So the vast majority of our contacts are from an educational stance, and to use those as opportunities to educate people and help them be safer. The environment of the water, I don't have to tell anyone here, is just very unforgiving. Unfortunately, when things go wrong, they tend to be more drastic than they do when you're on the land. So
Right.
Try to maximize as much as they can those opportunities to educate people, but that's a great point. We try with the Instagram page and during the opportunities we have when we contact people, but there's always other opportunities, and we're always looking for those opportunities. Maybe it's signage, maybe it's being a little more in tune with some of the smaller events that go on. Someone brought up the anchorage of boats and the kind of the ad hoc parties that are going on down there. I know in our experience, as the summer kind of crept along, as people got a little less cautious about what was going on, we did see an uptick in the number of people on the beach and in the harbor. And that there's other informal groups that are down there, and that's probably an excellent place for us to start. So thanks for the suggestion.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Sorry, muted again. Thank you, Commissioner Scherzan. And Commissioner Carlson, you're up.
I'm going a second time. I may be cutting ahead of Commissioner Light, but just a quick comment. Director Proud, with the new showers, is there any signage there? We used to have signage on rules of the road and stuff. And with the new showers and new stuff at the hand launch, might be a place to revisit that. Thanks.
Are you talking about signage related to swimming, or are you talking about?
We used to have signage and flyers for, rules of the road and advice to sup people, wear your life preserver, stay out of the main channel. And I haven't seen that in a while. There were, laminated flyers and laminated posters up here and there at some of the rental places.
Yeah, I was going to say what we were doing was, and unfortunately we've lost one of the places with the loss of Tarzan, but the rental company such as Paddle House, just to use them as an example, when they rent equipment to someone who's going to go out and have an SUP outing, they are supposed to advise them of, as much as they can, the rules of the road. As Chief Metzger said earlier, kind of the preferential areas where we'd like to see the SUPs go. So unfortunately, that also means a cross-channel trek to get to the other side, to that zone that you were speaking about earlier. But there are some, and then we had some infographics that were prepared and set up at various locations where we were seeing the heavy paddle activity, to help people know where those zones are and what the rules of the road are. We could certainly revisit that and make sure that that education is still occurring. I know the boards are still, I recently walked and saw that the boards are still in place. Whether the shops are still being as diligent about providing the instruction to their renters or not, we'd probably have to visit them and see what they're up to these days. It's probably been a couple of years since we've done that, so it might be time for a good refresher on that.
That it? Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Carlson. Commissioner Light, I apologize if we skipped you. Your hand was up and then it was down and now it's back up.
That's okay. So I just wanted to get back on the parties on the water. Is there a reason the police haven't enforced that, or have you issued citations related to those unpermitted parties on the water?
I'm not aware of us taking any direct enforcement action. The one thing that I'll say is, obviously when the police take immediate action, there's a level of satisfaction there because it's something people can see and see real result. But what I will say is that we're aware of it. We have been monitoring it. Everyone's equipped with body cameras, so there may be some footage that can be used for enforcement purposes. At this point, we're taking the stance of monitoring it and making sure that it isn't to the point where it's so out of control that it presents an obvious immediate danger to people. But there's obviously some concern about noise, the ability to communicate, possibly people drinking out there, and all the things that come along with that. So we're aware of it. We're monitoring it. Obviously, there's some concern, but we're also trying to balance the different interests in the harbor. If people are coming down and letter of the law may be violating something that may be an infraction or a misdemeanor, obviously it's not something we're going to turn a blind eye to, but we also don't want to roll in and with two officers crash a party of many people and have an event that could be controversial. So we're taking a measured response. If we saw something that was so far outside the bounds of safe conduct, we would intervene. At that point, to my knowledge, that hasn't happened. So we're just monitoring it and going to continue to monitor it to see how it evolves.
Well, to me, it's an unsafe situation. I've seen people jumping from boat to boat. There is definitely drinking and other drugs out there that are going on. I've seen that. So I just think, once you let one go, when do the next person who gets, if we ever did cite, all of a sudden they're like, why didn't you cite the other three? Or why can't I set up my party at Moonstone Park and have, amplified sound and just have a big party there? I just think it's a bad precedent. I think I'm not against the party. I just think it should be regulated and controlled, and there should be some control of safety because people are going boat to boat. They're rafting. They're blocking, channels for other users, not necessarily the main channel, but, if you're an outrigger canoeing, you're trying to get by. Some of those people get pretty obnoxious as they get drunk. So I don't know. I don't want to ruin the parties. I like attracting people to the harbor, but I do think there needs to be control on it. And what do? We wait till somebody's injured and then enforce it? I just think we should be proactive. That's my personal position on it.
Yeah,
that's all.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Light. Is there anybody else who's got a question or a comment? If not, thank you very much, Chief and Lieutenant Mendance, for keeping everybody safe out there and for your report. And look forward to seeing you, I guess, in about 3 months. And we're on to the director's report.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Actually, Chair Kilroy, could I have one more bite at
Sure.
the apple?
Yep.
I'd like to find out how we can agendize this and not just look the other way. At least have a discussion amongst ourselves. I know it's not agendized, so we can't get into it here, but I would like to talk to, what's the Harbor Commission's recommendation on this? Because I'm just afraid we turn a blind eye and all of a sudden somebody gets hurt and the city's liable.
You want to make a referral to staff at the end of the meeting? I mean, that might be one way to do it.
Right. That's the way to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Proud.
All right, I will move into my director's report and go through that with you. And as I usually do, I usually start by giving you a recap of some of the actions that the city council has taken since your last Harbor Commission meeting. The first thing is on their meeting of September 15th, we had the second reading of an amendment to the city's municipal code related to the appointment of harbor commissioners. We may have talked about this at the last meeting. I'm not entirely sure if we did or we didn't, but the reason that this came into being is that the municipal code talks about an appointment being made by the harbor and pier lessees. And over the years, that appointment process has generally been relegated to an appointment that's been recommended by the King Harbor Association. So the city council had a lot of discussion about this and ultimately decided to amend the municipal code to formalize that process so that the Harbor Commission, there would be a Harbor Commission appointee that would be a recommendation from the King Harbor Association in coordination with the Pier Association. So this was the second reading to adopt the municipal code, and the item was pulled by Councilmember Nierenheim because the reference inside of the proposed language for the municipal code referenced the King Harbor Association, and he found a political action committee that also was registered under the name of the King Harbor Association. And so we wanted to, and the council member in particular, and I believe the rest of the city council wanted to add some clarity to the language to ensure that this was meant to be an appointment by the Association of the Lessees, not an appointment made by a political action committee. So the item was pulled. The city attorney's office is going to retool that language, and it will ultimately be coming back to the city council for their consideration. At the September 22nd meeting, we had the appointments to the boards and the commissions, and that's when Chair Kilroy was reappointed and Commissioner Kruzan was added to the Harbor Commission. So congratulations to both of you for your appointments. And then there was also a discussion at that meeting, sort of a citywide discussion, but it did have some implications for businesses in the harbor, for the city to send a letter to the LA County Board of Supervisors regarding the reopening of breweries. As you may know, and you may have read, breweries were remaining closed under the Safer at Home order, the LA County Department of Public Health order, unless they had a on-site kitchen attached to their operation. So there was a lot of pressure coming from the craft breweries who wanted to bring in a food truck or a catering operation to support their service to see if the LA County Department of Public Health would allow that to happen. And they did. The county ultimately voted to allow that to occur, for breweries to reopen outdoors, as long as they partnered with a third-party food vendor and operated in a limited capacity. So for us at the harbor, we do have one tasting room, King Harbor Brewing. So that was really, they have a facility in the Riviera Village, and then they have the tasting room at the pier. So that assisted them. They've now applied for a temporary use permit to partner with someone and ultimately open an outdoor area, just as some of the other food establishments at the pier have done. And I now just lost it. Oh, I know. So that really leaves we believe there's really one last business at the pier that is still prohibited from opening, and that's New Starboard Attitude. They are a bar, and bars have not yet been cleared to open under the LA County order. So we are happy that we're down to one business. It's unfortunate for them that they still aren't able to come up with some kind of opening protocols for them. But good news for us is that we believe there is protocols in place to allow all of the other businesses at the pier to be open in some capacity under the COVID-19 restrictions. And then at the meeting last week, and this may have been a conversation that actually spanned a couple of city council meetings, there was a move by the city council to provide funding to businesses to help them offset some of their COVID-related expenses. The city council approved it for Artesia Boulevard, and they approved it for the Riviera Village Association to help them offset businesses on the boulevard and the association to offset some of their COVID-19 expenses. They capped it at $2,500. It was a first come, first served program. And the city council is now adding additional money to that program and expanding it to allow the peer businesses to apply for grants to assist them with some of their COVID-related expenses. If they had to put up protective equipment inside their operation, sneeze guards, plastic plexiglass, they had to buy PPE equipment, anything that was a direct cost in response to responding to COVID-19, they can apply to the city council for up to $2,000 in relief. They adjusted the amount a little bit to $2,000, but they're expanding the geographic boundaries to allow businesses at the pier, as well as businesses in other parts of the city, such as South PCH and other areas, to apply for this funding. So that hopefully will help a little bit, ease the burden that some of our businesses are facing in addressing COVID-19. Coming up on the council agenda item in next week will be some consent to amendments for some subleases with the Redondo Landing property. We have coming up on the 17th. Oh, also next week, and I'll talk about it in a minute, will be an update to the city council regarding the skate park. In November, the Redondo Beach Tourism District that was established, they provide their report to the city council. And then we also have our annual free holiday parking that'll be coming up to the city council as well. The skate park project, as you may know, you took a lot of time and gave some careful thought and deliberation to that project. One of the things that you requested is that some outreach occur, and Councilmember Lowenstein had his community meeting on September 23rd. And at his community meeting, he invited the gentlemen who were speaking with you, the Spawn Ranch group, to come and talk about the proposed skate park. We sent meeting invitations to that meeting to all of the businesses out at the pier to allow them to participate in the meeting if they were so interested. What's going to happen right now is there's going to be an update to the city council at their meeting on October 20th. And then that update is to relay that the Harbor Commission and others are supportive. You voted on a 6-1 vote with some concerns that you were supportive of the idea. So it's really to communicate to the city council that there seems to be support for the idea. There are some concerns, and then ultimately have the Spawn Ranch group make some of the adjustments that you recommended, come back to the Harbor Commission, and then ultimately go to the city council again for approval. I think the rationale for going to the city council next is this isn't currently a designated capital improvement project. So while there was some money set aside to look at the feasibility of the skate parks in the various locations, there hasn't been a formal capital improvement project that's been established to actually construct these. So I think the idea is to check in with the city council, let them know the feedback we've heard to date, and confirm that they'd like to move forward with future planning. And in that case, Spawn Ranch would make some of the modifications that you've suggested, and come back for your review one last time before it progresses forward. So that's the update on the skate park project. Wanted to give you some updates on some tenant related items. We are still offering some rent deferrals for peer businesses. It's fewer and fewer as they are slowly reopening. For example, the new Starboard Attitude that I just discussed, they're not able to open. And so we are, allowing a business like that to continue to defer their rent. For any of the businesses that have previously requested a rent deferral, we are in the process of reaching out to them right now and starting to establish a repayment plan. So generally what we're suggesting they do is start their repayment of any deferred rent at the beginning of 2021 and repay it over a 12-month window. So if they had deferred rent for any period between April and October, that over the 12-month window between January 2021 and December 2021, that we set up a payment plan so that by the end of 2021, we get almost everybody back current onto their rent program. As I mentioned, we have the temporary use permit process that's been very successful. We have 15 approved temporary use permits. out on the pier. And we expect that there will be another one coming with the King Harbor Brewing coming through the process. Changing topics a little bit. We do have a little bit of an update on the falconry program. I think I mentioned to you previously that with COVID and the lack of activity on the pier, we weren't flying the falcons as often, but now we're starting to see a little more activity. We are also having the fall migration, some return of the seagulls. And so you'll start to see the falconry program slowly starting to ramp back up. Bait operation. We're happy to let everyone know that there's a new ownership in bait for the bait barge, and that bait is currently being supplied onto the commercial operations right now. And the company that took over the bait operation is finalizing the documentation that they need to be able to sell bait to the public. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which relates to your blue folder item, is dredging. So as you know, we've been talking about the need for the dredging in the harbor, and I mentioned I want to bring this up and say I'm going to give you a short update because this isn't on the agenda as a discussion item. I can tackle a couple of questions, but we had been working with Noble Consultants to prepare the plans and specs for the project. They went out and did a sampling plan and submitted that information to the various regulatory agencies. And we are now in the process where the Army Corps of Engineers has issued a notice for, I'm going to give you the exact phrase here. I scroll to the top, an application for permit. So there's a public notice regarding the city's application for permit. And that public notice is available and an opportunity for members of the public to look through that public notice and provide comments to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the proposed dredging project. We are at this point looking at a window that's still probably about a year away before we would actually get to the formal dredging project itself. This first round is with the Army Corps of Engineers, but there are other permitting agencies that we need to work with. The Regional Water Quality Control Board. We need to make sure that we have the State Lands Commission on board with our dredging operation. The Coastal Commission, make sure we've taken care of any permits that may be necessary from them. So we're early in the process in terms of the public comment and soliciting input regarding the dredging plan. And I became aware of the notice. I embarrassingly, I guess, didn't know that notice was out on the street until we had an internal capital improvement project meeting. And I found out that notice was out. So I wanted to make sure that I gave you all a copy of the notice so that you knew it was out. And if you were getting any questions from folks, that you'd at least be aware that that comment period was open for folks to comment on a proposed dredging plan. A couple of questions that I've already received are questions regarding the disposal locations that are outlined in that notice. When we first started looking at the dredging plan, Noble, when they did the bathymetry survey of the harbor, what we realized was there's a depression in the harbor, and you see that in-harbor disposal location. And so one thought was that there was enough capacity there. It can't accommodate all of the dredge material, but it could accommodate a portion of the dredge material. And so from a cost perspective, the shorter distance that we have to take it, the less it costs us in terms of the dredging operation. And so one thought was that you could essentially take that depression and fill it in, and it would make it more level with some of the adjoining areas in terms of the bathymetry of the harbor. And then the remaining material would go, there's an offshore disposal area, which you see in that notice, and that's where the remainder of the material would go. That's a proposal. The regulatory agencies have not weighed in 100% as to whether they're going to agree with that proposal or not. But that's the whole point of actually having the public comment is to allow some of that debate to occur as to whether that's the appropriate location for some of the dredge material or whether all of that material should go out to that offshore disposal area. So that's still something that is being discussed with the regulatory agencies. It's part of the the proposed plan. It's subject to comments. I do have a comment on this item from Mark Hansen that I can read to you when I get to the end of the director's report. Well, let me just read it now because it's directly related to the dredging. So let me just refresh and make sure there's no other comments. Okay, so the comment that we have is from Mark, and Mark makes the comment that the notice from the Army Corps of Engineers acknowledges that the dredged materials tested in the south portion of dredging area 1 have elevated levels of DDTs and PCB cogeners. However, they propose to simply relocate those contaminated materials to the in-harbor placement site, which is similarly contaminated. It seems very illogical to move contaminants from one area of the harbor to another, rather than move those contaminants offshore where they could be diluted. We now have a significant population of stand-up paddle folks who routinely fall in the water. At some point in the future, it would be great to have zero depth entry into the South Turning Basin for our paddlecraft community, and to perhaps even consider a Mother's Beach. A new sports fishing pier could also potentially support increased launching of paddlecraft. It would seem best to look toward cleaning up the water in our harbor and not just stir up the existing contaminants and condense those contaminants, particularly at that end of the harbor. That's the only comment that we have on the director's report, but since it's related to dredging, I thought it was appropriate to read that for you now. Then last thing I have on my director's report, and then I'll take your questions, is I think we've mentioned to you that the hand launch will be coming out this winter for repairs. We haven't done it for a couple of years. That we now have a date. Our tentative date to pull that out is November 16th, and then it would be replaced in early March. And we are working on signage now to put out to let people know of the closure, and that there is an alternative launch that's near the boat hoist. You can use the docks that are at the boat hoist location. We also received an email, I believe it was from Commissioner Carlson, to send out a Nixle message. And we are working on trying to get a Nixle message out as well to let people know, probably a couple of weeks or so. We don't want to send it out too far in advance so that people forget about it. But we want to make sure we get a Nixle message out to let people know. That's just one more means of public communication. Last thing, 2 dates coming up. October 29th, strategic plan meeting. And on November 9th is the Harbor Commission meeting. And for the strategic plan meeting, tomorrow night, the City Council has an agenda item on their agenda. You may recall you did a lot of work in crafting a letter to the City Council earlier this year talking about the creation of 10-year goals. Well, I think they're finally going to take those letters up and have that conversation as part of their City Council meeting next week in preparation for an October 29th strategic plan meeting. They aren't currently seeking a letter like we typically do as to a work plan type of items to go on the strategic plan. This is the strategic plan that never occurred in March. And so that meeting was intended to be a conversation about these 10-year goals. So my expectation is that's what this particular strategic plan will again focus on. And then the meeting that follows that will then come back to this question of what are those 6-month strategic objectives that we all want to see happen to advance those various goals. And then last, your next Harbor Commission meeting is, of course, on November 9th. So that concludes my director's report. Happy to tackle any questions you may have. And as I said, I'll deal with the dredging questions as best I can, but we got to be careful about getting into too extended a conversation because it's not necessarily called out as a specific discussion item on your agenda. So happy to take questions. I can call on the hands, Chair Kilroy, or if you'd like to, feel free.
No, you covered what I was going to say, which was, the dredging, I'm sure, is a hot topic amongst the commissioners, but being that it's not agendized, we really got to keep that part kind of short. But thank you very much for the report. And I've got Commissioner Carlson up there first. Well, I guess I've got him in order. Anyway, Commissioner Carlson, you have some questions?
Thanks. Yeah. So, warn me off if this is too much conversation on dredging. maybe we can agendize dredging for next time. I read through the notice and I could not see a date on how long public comments are open. Do you know? Does anyone know?
So the top of the notice has the comment period opened on September 29th, 2020, and it closes on October 29th, 2020. So it's got about a little over another 2 weeks to run, close to 3 weeks to run. Probably about 2.5 weeks left in the comment period.
Okay, thank you.
30-day comment period.
Thanks. That's not much. I'm glad. Thank you for the warning on this. So there is no time then to bring this up at the next meeting. So I'll ask my next question then. And if we can't discuss this, I understand. In the past, we've discussed how there is an agreement or an unclear agreement on how much maintenance we have to do to the break wall. Is there any clarification or change in that with what we're doing in the Army now? And particularly what I'm worried about is there's a lot of sand at the north end, and the north end has a lot of scouring on it. So I'm worried when that sand comes away, the break wall fall down.
So we will coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers, and obviously they're putting out this particular notice, so they are very aware of the scope of work that we're proposing to do. Our hope going back a year or two had been that there is a project that the Army Corps of Engineers is moving very slowly on, which is to address some of the structural issues with the break wall itself. And in order for them to do that work, they need to bring equipment into the harbor to get it close enough to the break wall to actually be able to do it. There's two ways they can do it, apparently. They can either reach from the wall down into the water and then kind of throw the dredge material over the wall to the ocean side, or they can actually work from in the water. If they were going to work from in the water, they needed to create an access channel for themselves to be able to do that. And our hope had been at one point to try to coordinate with them so that that access channel that they were going to create combined with our dredging program would effectively be the entire dredging operation. Quite frankly, we kind of got tired of waiting. The process there is very slow. If you're not on their work plan, even if you are on the work plan, it can take them a while. And we have heard over and over again that the conditions in the harbor are getting worse, that we need to get going on a dredging program. And so what we decided to do is we just said, look, we're going to go on our own. We're going to go out. We're going to, take our sampling plan, delineate the areas that need to be dredged, start working with the regulatory agencies. And if the Army Corps of Engineers catches up, great. If they don't, then what we're going to do is we're going to try to convince them that the work that we're doing for the dredging is beneficial to the work they will need to do on the break wall, and that will serve as our in-kind contribution to what we would have had to pay to do the break wall. Because the way that the break wall is set up, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but the break wall project, the Army Corps of Engineers believes that when the break wall was raised, that the city accepted responsibility for that upper portion of the break wall. So therefore, if there were any improvements that needed to be made to the break wall, the Corps would pay for a portion of it and the city would have a financial obligation for the other portion. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the dredging project and then say, hey, we saved you money. We made an in-kind contribution by providing you the access to get to the break wall itself. As to your question about the structural integrity of the break wall in the area that we're proposing the dredging, I probably don't have enough engineering expertise to explain why or why not that could be an issue. But we do know that all of the regulatory agencies, including the Corps, is looking at our proposed plan. And so we would expect that if they had particular concerns as to whether our dredging would undermine that structural integrity, that would be one of the comments they would be making as part of our permit application.
Thanks. As part of this, is there any discussion on work on the south wall, on the inner break wall?
So the diagram that you see attached to the public notice, does show the dredging operation. Are you talking about the little jetty that leads you into Basin 3?
Yeah, and I'm talking about extending it to protect the area from storm surge, protect your future boat ramp, et cetera.
Yeah, for our project, we're only talking about dredging. That would be a conversation we would have with the Army Corps of Engineers when they're ready to maybe resume work on the design of their breakwall work. We would want to talk to them about whether there's an opportunity to piggyback on that work by adding a little bit of length to that jetty wall.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Changing subjects and just kind of going around the harbor. It looks like there's a kayak rental at the gas stop now. You mentioned in the past maybe REI was going to come in there and work with Portofino.
Yeah, REI works with the Portofino. They have a letter of a mutual letter of intent that they're working with the Portofino on. We've reached an agreement with the Portofino on collecting a little percentage rent from that operation. So that should be REI that's operating out of that spot right there.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, that's great news. Do you have any update on the power plant and New Century Power other than what we read in the papers?
No, there's really no new news related to the power plant that I'm aware of. So
the city filed a lawsuit against the water board.
Yeah. So the water
in the articles, yeah.
1-year extension, the city filed a suit that basically claimed that the water board did not examine the potential impacts on this. It's essentially a kind of a failure to follow CEQA type lawsuit, that they didn't look to measure whatever impacts could possibly occur from that additional year of operation of the power plant. So I guess that is the one piece of new news.
So in the last meeting we had discussed, this is my last one. In the last meeting we were discussing the skate park, and you were saying potentially things were opening up a little bit. Does that mean we can start, talking about launch ramp again? Or do you think, what's the next thing we do on launch ramp? Is it to have a public workshop after COVID, or, or what do you think there?
So here's kind of where I see coming down the road for launch ramp. Councilmember Nierenheim made a referral to staff to talk about the creation of a public amenities master plan, something near and dear to all of your hearts. This has been something that you all have had on your strategic plan letter, gosh, I don't know, at least 2 times, maybe even 3 times, to talk about the creation of this public amenities master plan. So what we are going to do, the challenge we have with the public amenities master plan is it requires some funding for us to have the expertise to pull it together, because we're not just talking now about the boat ramp. We're talking about the boat ramp. We're talking about the lagoon. We're talking about the sport fishing pier. We're talking about any public promenade or public access around the perimeters. So the idea being that this is all things that you've included in your strategic plan, is to say, hey, we need to look at this in its totality and make sure we have crafted a framework, a public framework within which anything else could possibly occur if there's going to be some revitalization activity. So what we're working on now in response to Councilmember Nierenheim's request is to take something to the city council. I don't have an exact date. It'll likely be maybe early December, to say, okay, here's the work we've done to date. So essentially chronicle what we've done to date, and here's what we think we need to do to start to advance this public amenities master plan, and help them understand that in order for us to start to advance this, it will require us to probably bring on a marine engineer that has the expertise that can pull all of those things together, and then some kind of a design element. And I don't know if that's a landscape architect, if that's a land planner, but somebody who can help us kind of stitch these pieces together in that process and take the temperature of the city council. We think it's important. You think it's important. So we believe it's the right thing to do. We didn't, because we didn't know what was going to be happening this year. It's not currently in our contracts and professional services account to have a budget to be able to bring those professionals on board. So that's really the question at hand is the city council willing to allow us to move forward, to maybe put out an RFP for those design professionals, bring them on board, and start this master planning process finally. So I think that's the good news. And what we don't want to do now, if that's what the road we're heading down, is we don't want to just do an isolated feasibility study for the boat ramp. We want that to occur in the context of this bigger master planning effort so that we're really understanding. It sort of goes back, and Commissioner Light will appreciate this. It kind of goes back to some of those boat ramp feasibility studies that we've been bringing up at these workshops over the years. That'll be a piece of a broader planning exercise to really understand how all these different pieces fit together. So I think it's a good news item that we're finally getting ready to start to prepare something for council's consideration to see if they're willing to fund this work effort that you have been pushing them to do over the last
because they might not be
years. So that's where we are on sort of the ramp. It's getting folded into a bigger public amenities conversation.
I'll take that as great news. Yeah,
I think it's good news. I think it's good news.
I would love to see a master plan. It just makes me ask one more follow-up question. The last time we were talking about the ramp, I think that there was still one plan to be studied to see if it passed Measure C or not. So, do you think we could walk into that master plan with a good set of approved plans for placement of a launch ramp in, a few places? And that might be a question for Commissioner Light.
No, I think I'll take a crack at it, and maybe Commissioner Light has an opinion. He wants to take a crack at it. I think what we were going to work on. So the reason that we were thinking about doing a feasibility study for what we were calling the Mole C location, the Joe's Crab Shack location, was because the city had exercised a early termination provision with Joe's Crab Shack, and Councilmember MD did not want that money to be wasted money. She said, look, if we're going to spend the money to exercise the early termination provision, let's get started on trying to plan something there. What I expect this public amenities master plan to do is probably, rather than just do a feasibility study for Mole C, I expect it's probably going to reignite the conversation as to whether Mole C or Mole D are the more appropriate location for the public boat ramp. That's my expectation. We've drawn, Noble, as part of one of our public workshops, actually drew a Measure C compliant plan for the Joe's Crab Shack location. And what it did was it encroached onto the Seaside Lagoon. And so that would then make you have to say, and that's why I think it's appropriate to talk about it in the context of a public amenities master plan, because it then takes you to the next question of, well, if you implemented the boat ramp at the Joe's Crab Shack location in that configuration, how would you have to reconfigure the Seaside Lagoon to be Measure C compliant? Because the Measure C has certain provisions related to Seaside Lagoon as well. So, from my perspective, I think it's a better exercise to be talking about all of these things together because they all are interrelated to one another. The sport fishing pier, the Seaside Lagoon, the public boat launch facility, and the circulation elements. It's almost like if you push a balloon in one place and it comes out the other, they all have these interrelationships with one another. And I think it's a better conversation to be talking about them collectively than to try to just individually plan them and then stitch them together and hope it works. So
thanks.
That's one man's opinion. Jim, you may have a different opinion relative to that question. So
Nope.
Get to your.
I definitely agree with that. I'm basically just asking, is there any homework we should be doing right now so that, we can hit the ground running?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is we've done a lot of drawings for Mole D and Mole C. So we do have some background work to start with. We actually had started, you may recall, with some of the public workshops on the sport fishing pier to start to think about some of the programmatic elements. So I think we'll be bringing all of that stuff back to the table and then figuring what else we need to have to be able to have a more holistic conversation about public amenities in that portion of the harbor.
Thanks a lot.
So I see it as a good news item, and I see it as being very responsive to what you all have been requesting as part of your various strategic plan letters, at least the last 2 or 3 of them.
That it?
Yes, thanks.
Commissioner Carlson. Commissioner Light.
Sure, thank you. So Director Proud, I'm a little confused at how this, it looks like the city did a study and made a recommendation to the Army Corps. Why didn't the Harbor Commission get to see that before it even went to the Corps to opine on it?
So we did a sampling plan, and then we did, and then as part of the sampling plan and the analysis of the dredging locations, that was submitted to a collective group of the various regulatory agencies. They meet on a regular basis, and they kind of gather together. They provide their comments back. You know, we didn't bring it to the heart. Frankly, I didn't know it was going to go this far already. To, like I said, this notice sort of caught me by surprise that they were already at the point where they were in the public comment period. I found out about it at one of our capital improvement project internal meetings. So I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm just saying that, you know, it kind of got further down the road from the public comment perspective than I thought where we were in the process. So that may be my fault for not tracking it as closely as I could have to get it to you in between, because what we needed to do, there's kind of it's a 2-step process. We go out and we do a survey, we identify the areas where the dredging needs to occur. We go out and we do a sampling plan, which I've reported to you in the past in my director's report that we've prepared these sampling analysis plans. I've told you when the vessels have gone out to collect those samples that they're going to be out there doing that. The plan gets together, the information and the data gets together. It goes out to the regulatory agencies. And all of that work had been done, but I guess there was between there and where we are today, I didn't realize we were already into the process of saying, we now have an application in and we're looking for public comment on that. That's different from having the regulatory agencies review our data that we've collected on all these various samples that we've taken to determine appropriate locations for their disposal. So, you know, if there was a step in there that maybe we could have caught it and brought it to your attention, we should have. Like I said, I didn't know that we were already moving that fast to be in the application and public comment process with the Army Corps of Engineers. So, you know, we find that's how.
So is there other events in the timeline where we can affect the outcome? Because I'm very concerned about dumping in the harbor. Same as what Mark Hansen brought up, but even more so, you know, we're the hand launch boat ramp is shoaling every year, and that's, you know, a path of wave power coming in the harbor. I mean, we see it with the surge. So we're going to dump sand in there and potentially, you know, accelerate shoaling in the hand launch boat ramp. Already at low tides, most of that dock is sitting on, you know, just sitting on sand. Yeah. And I'm also surprised that we're not doing anything about that, you know, dredging that area out.
Yeah, I am as well. And there were actually a couple of corner areas in some of the basins that have typically been a question mark as well. So I can certainly go back to Public Works and have that conversation with them. You know, this, like I said, it caught me a little bit by surprise. And so, you know, some of the questions you're asking, I don't necessarily have great answers for right now. I brought this to your attention just because I didn't want this window to slip by without you all knowing it as well. And look, you know, it may not be the perfect answer, but you are certainly free. And I would expect that you could comment on any concerns that you might have as part of this open comment period. I know you would have liked to have done that, you know, perhaps as the Harbor Commission as well, but this is a window to at least provide some of those comments right now.
Well, we can do it. I mean, we've done it in the past, declared it an emergency because it's the only window to comment. And we did that in the past when we got a short deadline thing. I don't know if the commission has the heart for that this night, but I am certainly concerned about, number one, the dumping inside the harbor and making that shallow and potentially worsening, the shoaling in the hand launch boat ramp. And then second, the pollution associated with that. And then third, why we're not dredging the hand launch boat ramp area. So it's the dock's not sitting on the sand, for a significant period of time. So I'll let that up if someone wants to make a motion to make this an emergency thing. Otherwise, I'll just comment on it. But I'm a little concerned that this is, one of the major things we talk about as the Harbor Commission, and now it's almost OBE for us because we can't meet again in the comment period. The second thing is, I've also heard that the council is considering homeless housing on Mole B. Can you talk to that?
They have not formally taken that question up. And so I don't know that I can comment on that right now. I haven't heard that location discussed by the city council, and it hasn't been discussed with me personally.
So I'm mixed on that. I'm supportive of doing something for the homeless under COVID, but my concern is it becomes a long-term, once you get residential units in there, you can never get them out. We've got a whole, we've got 2.5 or just under 2.5 million to really do something with that park. And I'd hate to ruin that opportunity because we let some housing get in there that we could never get out again.
Yeah, and just for the rest of the commissioners, in case you all may not follow the city council meetings as closely. So there was a city council discussion regarding providing temporary housing for homeless at an area up near Aviation Park, I believe it was, if I recall.
Yeah, behind the gym.
Yeah, it's kind of called, they call it pallet housing is I think what the name of the actual housing project is. And what Commissioner Light is referring to is, some chatter that's out there about could there possibly be, rather than put it up at the aviation location, could they do it at the Moonstone Park location? Like I said, I don't believe they've taken that up as a agenda item to formally discuss it. One of the things that would certainly have to be taken into consideration if they did is that is a landing site for emergency helicopter evacuate. If there's an emergency that requires a helipad type location, and it has been used since I've been here for that purpose. So that would have to be taken into consideration as to what then would be the alternative location for any kind of emergency access by helicopter. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's not on their agenda for next week that I'm aware of. So I don't know when they're going to take that issue up again. And at that point, they may talk about Moonstone Park as a location, but they haven't had a conversation yet. So I don't have any particular insight as to whether that's something they're giving serious consideration to or not.
So
Okay.
just to add a little more gasoline on that whole topic. For those who don't know, this is all the result of a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case from Boise, Idaho, where they basically ruled that cities cannot enforce their no camping ordinances unless they have places for homeless people to actually go to, beds. And they said you had to have 60% available of whatever your homeless population is. So Redondo Beach's homeless population was put at something in the neighborhood of 112, I believe. And so they'd need 65 beds or something. I've heard a number of locations talked about. Seaside Lagoon was one that I've heard mentioned. My personal favorite actually is this is really getting off topic, so is the proposed or the future transit center. Anyway, but I'll leave it at that. It is something that there hasn't been that much discussion about from a public point of view, let alone from particular commissions that I know of. And hopefully everyone will have an opportunity to comment on that before a decision is made. Commissioner Light, do you have anything else?
Just one other thing. We talked earlier about the AES property, and Redondo's filed a lawsuit that's basically a sequel lawsuit against the action by the Water Board. Hermosa has also submitted a lawsuit citing very similar things for the power plant site. So should be interesting to see. And for those I don't know if anybody caught the LA Times article, but there's been a lot of banner that the power plant was needed. And look, we had brownouts and rolling blackouts during the peak heat periods. Well, it turns out our power plants were producing power for other states at the time, which is why they couldn't meet the power demands in California. So it was poor. It wasn't a lack of capacity. It was poor planning that caused those blackouts. So that's all I had. And I don't know if the commission wants to bring up formal comments to the core document, or whether we just want to let it slide by and do it individually. I left that up to the rest of you. I'm not going to make a motion.
So I guess I'll ask Director Proud, is there a procedure for us to add something onto the agenda on an emergency basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've done it once before.
Yep.
Where you sort of felt like it was an emergency situation and it compelled a action. So I don't think you would be out of bounds if you were to make that motion again or to take that action again, since you've done it previously. And given that the comment deadline will occur before your next Harbor Commission meeting. So you would, and I actually think Commissioner Light, you may have been the one last time to propose that. So, you could certainly make a motion that, you determine that there is an emergency action that needs to be taken and move forward accordingly.
Well, I'll make the motion then, because I do think it's really important that we're formally on the record with our comments regarding the location of wherever dredging material is dumped. And I think it's important that our comments are part of that record. So I'll make the motion that we include it as an emergency agenda item. If somebody wants to make a second.
Second.
So that being the case, I think we do need a roll call vote on this.
Agreed. Commissioner Callahan?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Walters?
No.
Commissioner Bauer?
Yes.
Commissioner Krazan? We got you. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And Commissioner Light?
Yes.
And Chair Kilroy?
Yes. So that being the case that we've added this, so to speak, on the agenda, I know we're in the middle of the director's report. Do we want to finish up formally with the director's report and get any other questions done? Yes, let's do that first. Commissioner Light, did you have anything else with regards to the director's report?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Walters?
Yeah, thank you. Steve, I just had a couple questions on the application. So this is really a notice of preliminary decision, correct, from the U.S. Army Corps?
I'm scrolling down to see what the actual action is.
It doesn't say that, but I read it as such because they've the way it's written, there's the comment period, and I take it that if they don't receive any comments for them to take action on, what you see there in the piece of paper is going to be what they're going to decide. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're looking to do is to formulate what types of, if you go into their proposed special conditions, they're really trying to figure out what kinds of things might need to be included under those conditions for which a permit would be issued, right? So they're
Yeah, so it
talking
looks
about
like-
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
it
ahead,
looks
sir.
like there's additional work for you to do. Quite
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think they've outlined, some of the things that need to be done prior to any dredging operations occurring, any studies that need to be done.
Right.
So yeah, they're laying out their kind of first wave of conditions, which really become the basis for which people can comment as to whether they believe those are sufficient or not related to the proposed activities.
Okay, I just found it interesting that one of their comments was they didn't believe an EIS was required, but they go through a laundry list of environmental impacts, which you're supposed to do a review and submit more documents on. So the other question I had was relating to the DDT. Someone had mentioned, I think one of the commenters, that your soil sampling showed DDT and PCBs.
That was the comment that I read into the record that Mark sent to you. Yes.
Yeah. So, but that's from your soil sample report, correct? The one that you're
That's correct.
Okay. Do the consultants find the source of the DDT? Is it an ongoing source, or is this historical from paint on ships from years ago or something?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and, like I said, I wasn't really prepared to have this as a discussion item, so I'd have to go back and look at that report to refresh my memory on what they thought the source of that contamination was. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. I believe DDT was a component of anti-fouling coatings or something on ships at one time, many years ago. So I wouldn't think it'd be an ongoing source. I believe those are prohibited these days.
So from what I understand, Dow Chemical, I think it was Dow, who was located in Torrance, because I know they had a big environmental issue with DDT in the soil there. From what I recall, there were drums dumped off the PV Peninsula containing DDT. DDT is an insecticide. I don't know why it would be in an anti-fouling coating, but it could be something from a historical basis.
It served a couple of purposes, but pesticides is primarily the one. I was just curious whether there's an ongoing source. The only other way I could imagine it getting into the harbor would be through stormwater discharge. But anyway, I was just curious if that is in the consultant's report, Steve. I'll take a deeper dive and take a look. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Walters. Okay, so Commissioner Carlson, you had a question?
Yeah, given that we don't have all the data, are we better off calling an emergency meeting in a week or two while we're still in the window, or do we do this tonight? Again, I'm not sure how this works.
You could. I'm trying to. I'm trying to pull up a calendar here. You could do a special meeting. Let me grab my calendar here. Forgive me while my calendar loads. You could do a special meeting. There we go. I just have to check on the noticing requirements. I think we probably have a window that we could notice it. You could do a special meeting 2 weeks from tonight, which would be the 26th of October. Well, frankly, you could do it any night that y'all are available, since we don't have to have a council chamber. We're doing it on Zoom. But you could do a special meeting 2 weeks from tonight, and that would give us a chance to maybe distribute some additional materials to you for your review. I sort of share your concern, Commissioner Carlson, that I haven't sent you the formal sampling analysis plan and, had an opportunity for you to take a look at that yet. So, that's one way you could tackle it rather than tackling it as an emergency measure tonight. And that might give everyone a couple of weeks and we could get some of the materials and pull it together and have a little bit more of an informed conversation. I could see if our public works folks who are working on the dredging project are available to also attend that meeting. Since I can guarantee you're going to ask some technical questions that I probably won't know the answer to, just because I'm not a coastal engineer, nor am I an expert in terms of sampling analysis plans and what those core soil samples have and don't have in them, and what the possible sources are.
Do you have the authority to do a special meeting, incur the cost of a special meeting?
That was going to be my next question.
Do I have the authority to call a special meeting?
Or do we have the authority?
Well, we could call a special meeting. I mean, I don't think that's, my only challenge is just making sure that we meet the noticing requirements.
Well, if it's emergency,
yeah,
then we don't necessarily have to meet.
And I think with a 2-week window, we probably have we could craft a public notice and get that out and published in time. I think, Elizabeth or Lori, if you think, let me know. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah.
That
we'll
could do
be
a
able to
special-
publish it on time.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's really, that would be my only concern, is just making sure we try to meet that, that noticing requirement if we can, just so the public has an opportunity to be able to comment as well to you, to inform your comments then to the Army Corps of Engineers.
Fair enough. I guess I'll entertain a motion then. If someone wants to make a motion to hold a special meeting on October 26th.
I think we should amend the emergency edition first. We called for an emergency addition to the agenda tonight. Don't we need to amend that?
Well, you could have make an argument that what we're discussing falls underneath that. So
Yeah, I think
don't know.
that's,
Okay.
yeah, I think you're having enough of a conversation right now that I think you're probably inside of your emergency. I agree with you, Chair Kilroy. You're probably inside of your emergency coverage to be discussing as to whether you want to have another meeting to take this up as a formal item. So if you'd like to call that special meeting, I think, we would be supportive of staff of having that meeting. So whether you have the authority to call it or not, I think we would be amenable to supporting a special meeting on this topic.
Shall I make the motion?
Sure. I'll
Second.
take that as a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a roll call vote on.
Sure.
So the motion
Commissioner Cal-
is to have a special meeting on October 26th at 6:30 and do all the noticing.
Commissioner Callahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walters,
No.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
I
You
skipped,
missed one.
Commissioner Krazan,
Yes.
and Chair Kilroy.
Yes.
Okay, so we will, I will caveat that by saying I'll have to talk to our public works folks and see if we have somebody available that night, but we'll pull something together. If not, I'll talk to the chair and the vice chair and we'll figure something out. But for now, we'll tentatively plan on the 26th as the night that we'll reconvene to take up the topic of dredging.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you very much. So I've got multiple hands still raised and I'm just not sure whether,
I'm going to lower mine there.
okay.
It,
So
Jared,
Commissioner Carlson,
it may still be me that might have all happened under my discussion, but I'm happy with that because I'm particularly concerned about the DDT, and I'd like to know more about that because, frankly, I'm not thrilled with dumping that outside the harbor either. I mean, we're dumping it right off, one of our best local surf breaks, and you all may remember that area is a nursery for giant sea bass, an endangered species. I've brought that. Well, squid are less endangered than giant sea bass. They are market squid. They are eaten. But there have been papers published. I've brought them to the commission, saying that area is a nursery for giant sea bass half the year. Dumping DDT on it is not great. And the last time we dredged, I know it was somewhere else that we got the sand, but it filled the ocean with plastic. So I'd like to know more about the quality of the sand between the trash in it and certainly the DDT in it. So, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Light?
I just want to make sure, I'm going to save my comments for the actual meeting. I just want to make sure we have the documentation we need to discuss, at that meeting. So whatever got sent to the Corps, including those samples from the harbor, and anything else that went, instructions on, how we directed them, that we wanted to, what areas we wanted to dredge and stuff like that. So any of the materials that went to the Corps, I'd like to have as part of the package.
We'll pull together what we have and get that out to you, and I'll try to get that out to you. Let's see where we at schedule wise. Just trying to look ahead. Just want to make sure you have enough time to look at it and make sure it's productive. So we'll do our best to get that out to you as soon as we can.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Amy?
Thank you, Commissioner Light. Commissioner Bauer?
Yeah, I'm having a little problems. Really kind of off not on the dredging, but the funding for the for helping the Redondo small businesses. Where did that come from? Is that our local funding, or did we get a federal?
There was CARES grant money that was allocated to the city of Redondo Beach, and so the city council has been discussing allocating a portion of that CARES Act money to allow for the assistance to small businesses, including the ones at the pier that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. I think we're ready to move on to the next item, which is the Harbor Commission nominations and election of chairperson and vice chair. Seeing no objections, Director Proud, do you want to kind of give a little bit of explanation as to how we go about doing that?
So traditionally, what you all have done is, the person who has been serving as the vice chair moves up and becomes the chair, and then the next highest tenured person who hasn't already served as a chairperson or a vice chairperson becomes the vice chair. But you are certainly free to break from that protocol if you'd like. You could make it an open nomination process if you'd like. But just in my, 5 or 6 years, that's kind of been the customary practice, has been the chair steps down, the vice chair becomes the chair upon election by the rest of the Harbor Commission. And then there's a nomination, and typically it's the nomination of the person who's got the next highest level of seniority to be the vice chair. We were just to kind of help you with that process. We did all of that math. We think in our office, and we think that person is Commissioner Carlson.
It is. It is.
So, having Commissioner Callahan having already served. So when you look at that and go through the seniority list, that becomes the next person in line. So that's really the background on it. But like I said, that's not written in stone anywhere. You are certainly free to, do an open election if that's how you choose. But that's been the convention in the past.
Thank you very much. It's also the convention of virtually every commission I've ever served on, as far as I know, even though you're right, it's not written down anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Commissioner Light, you're the vice chair, aren't you?
Yes.
That's correct.
Good. I will nominate Commissioner Light to be the next chairperson.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have a roll call vote on that then. Commissioner Callahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walters,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Curzon,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Abstain.
and Chair Kilroy.
Yes.
All right, so that passes. So
Does Jim have to accept the nomination? Or we just give it to him?
He blew it when he abstained and didn't vote no.
As long as there's no speech.
All right, so we've elected a new chairperson, so it's now time to elect a new vice chairperson.
So,
I nominate,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Vicky.
I nominate Roger Carlson for vice chair.
Second.
All right, and we'll take a roll call vote on that nomination.
Yeah, if there's no other nominations, which I don't think
There's
there
not.
are.
There's not. Those are the only two positions that we need to fill tonight. Commissioner Callahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Abstain.
Commissioner Walters,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kazan,
Yes.
Commissioner Light,
Yes.
or should I say Chair-elect Light, and Chair Kilroy.
For the last time, yes.
All right, so those positions are now filled. If we were sitting inside the council chambers, we'd have that, ceremonial
Movement of the seats.
where Jim gets to sit in the chair and grab the gavel and do the business that needs to be done. But unfortunately, we'll have to do that virtually tonight. So you don't get to bang a gavel. Maybe you can bang on your desk at home or something if you'd like. But you are now in control of the meeting, Chair Light.
Okay, did we close all the discussions related to the director? I think we did.
I think we
No.
did. I think we're on to referrals
Referrals. Yeah.
and adjournment.
Okay, so let's go through referrals to staff. I'm not sure I can see everybody on my screen right now, but we'll start with outgoing Chair Kilroy.
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Vicky?
Yeah, I was going to ask Director Proud when we were going to have a mooring report.
We typically do those
Don't we do those quarterly?
quarterly, so we will check in. We could do that in November. I'll double check and see when we did the last mooring report.
Okay.
We could do that for you soon.
I'm kind of anxious to see what's happened with the COVID issue.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out.
And that's all I have.
Commissioner Carlson?
Nothing, thanks.
Commissioner Walters?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Bauer?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Kazan?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, I have one that I brought up earlier, and that was the, what was it now? I'd like to bring up the topic of boat parties and permitting and action related to that for the next meeting. And that's my only referral.
Okay, we got that done. And then before we adjourn, I would like to just have the record reflect that we probably need to make a correction on the consent calendar. So the consent items have the approval of the affidavit for posting the Harbor Commission meeting. And then it also has the approval of the minutes of the September 14th meeting. And I think in doing the roll call vote, I actually took a vote from Commissioner Curzon, and she was not in attendance at that meeting. And so I'd like the record to reflect that we should not have asked her to vote for that particular item since she wasn't at that meeting. So my apologies I probably should have taken those as two separate items as opposed to a collective on the consent. So just a little housekeeping, and we'll have the minutes reflect that.
No worries. I've been around long enough. I should have thought of it too.
It didn't hit me until we were about 30 or 40 minutes past it that I looked back at the agenda and I realized we probably should have done the separate items. So other than that, I appreciate the indulgence, Chair Light.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting to the 26th of October at 6:30.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have a roll call vote?
We can. Commissioner Callahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walters,
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Cruzan,
Yes.
Chair Light.
Yes, and with that, adjourn to the 26th. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Everyone, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.